Waking up next to the man who claimed your soul only to find a stranger staring back at you destroys a person. He traced my mating mark with a cold, detached finger and asked who I was. That was the day my alpha died, even though his heart was still beating. I still remember the exact scent of the rain hitting the pavement on Montgomery Street the day everything fell apart. It was a typical dreary San Francisco Tuesday. I was sitting at my drafting desk at Gensler Architecture, nursing a lukewarm coffee, waiting for Darian to pick me up for our anniversary dinner. Darian Caldwell, the CEO of Caldwell. Innovation's a titan in the tech industry, and more importantly, my fiercely devoted alpha. We had been mated for exactly 1 year, and the bite mark on my scent gland still hummed with the warm, spicy aroma of cedar and black pepper that belonged exclusively to him. When my phone rang, it wasn't his custom ringtone. It was an unknown number. "Is this Luca Harper?" a stern, professional voice asked. "I'm calling from UCSF Medical Center. There's been a multi-vehicle collision on Highway 101. Darian Caldwell is in surgery. You are listed as his emergency contact." The world tilted on its axis. The drive to the hospital was a blur of flashing traffic lights and blinding panic. When I arrived, the sterile, bleached smell of the emergency ward hit me like a physical blow. I sat in the waiting room for 6 agonizing hours, my hands trembling so violently I couldn't even hold a paper cup of water. Dr. Hamilton, a tired-looking beta surgeon, finally emerged. "He's stabilized," the doctor said, his expression guarded. He suffered severe head trauma, a depressed skull fracture, and significant swelling in the temporal lobe. "We won't know the full extent of the cognitive damage until he wakes up." I practically lived in that ICU room for 5 days. I slept in a plastic chair holding his large, calloused hand, pressing my scent glands against his wrist, desperately trying to use my omega pheromones to soothe his healing body. On the 6th morning, his eyelids fluttered. I jumped up, tears instantly blurring my vision. "Darian, baby, I'm here. I'm right here." His dark eyes slowly focused on my face. The warmth that usually melted his strict features whenever he looked at me was entirely absent. Instead, there was a heavy, impenetrable fog. He pulled his hand out of my grasp, his brow furrowing in confusion. "Who?" His voice was raspy, broken from the intubation tube. "Who let you in here? Where is my mother?" My breath hitched. "Dar, it's me. It's Luca. Your mate." He stared at me, his gaze dropping to the claiming mark on my neck. A look of sheer revulsion crossed his face, followed quickly by genuine bewilderment. "Mate, I don't have a mate. I'm engaged to... He clutched his head, groaning in pain. "Get the nurse. I don't know who this kid is." Before I could even process the words, the heavy wooden door swung open. In walked Beatrix Caldwell Darian's mother. Beatrix was an imposing old-money alpha who wore Chanel-like armor and possessed a heart made of absolute ice. She had never approved of me. To her, a junior architect with a public school background was nothing but a peasant muddying the Caldwell bloodline. She took one look at the monitor, then at Darian's confused face, and finally her sharp eyes landed on my tear-streaked cheeks. She instantly realized what had happened. "Mother," Darian rasped, looking relieved. "Why is there a stranger in my room crying? What happened to me?" Beatrix walked past me, deliberately shoving her shoulder into mine, and took the spot beside his bed. "Oh, my poor boy. You were in a terrible car accident. But you're safe now." She glanced back at me, a wicked, triumphant glint in her eye. "And don't worry about him, darling. That's just Luca. He's a temporary assistant from the office. He brought some files and got overly emotional. You know how these fragile Omegas are. An assistant, I choked out, stepping forward. Beatrix, what are you doing? Tell him the truth. Security. Beatrix called out without missing a beat, pressing the call button. My son is recovering from a traumatic brain injury, and this employee is causing him distress. Darian, look at me. I begged, my voice cracking. I desperately flared my pheromones, trying to reach the dormant bond inside him. We lived together in Piedmont. We were married last spring, at the Fairmont. Darian flinched, holding his bandaged head. My scent, which used to be his favorite comfort, was now causing him physical agitation. Stop! He growled an alpha command, lacing his tone that forced my knees to buckle. I said, I don't know you. Get out! The hospital security guards dragged me out of the room. I stood in the hallway, pressing my back against the cold linoleum wall, sliding down until I hit the floor. The bond inside my chest felt like it was being ripped apart by barbed wire. Retrograde amnesia, Dr. Hamilton later explained to me in the corridor. The trauma had wiped the last 3 years of his memory. Darian remembered his company. He remembered his mother. But he had entirely forgotten the years we spent falling in love. He had forgotten me. And Beatrix was going to make sure he never remembered. For the next 3 weeks, I existed in a state of living purgatory. Darian was discharged and returned to our sprawling modern estate in the Piedmont Hills. But it wasn't our home anymore. It was his, and by extension, Beatrix's. I refused to leave. I stubbornly stayed, hoping that walking through the halls we decorated together or sleeping in the guest room would spark something in his broken mind. But Beatrix was ruthless. She had systematically removed every photograph of us from the house. She deleted my contact from his phone, wiped our digital footprint, and told him that the mating mark on his neck was a drunken mistake he made during a business trip to Vegas, a mistake he had been in the process of getting surgically removed before the crash. Darian treated me worse than a stranger. He treated me like a parasite. Every time I tried to speak to him, his pheromones spiked with irritation. He looked at me with a mixture of pity and annoyance. To make matters worse, Beatrix brought in Oliver. Oliver was a stunning, wealthy Omega from a prominent San Francisco shipping family. He was everything Beatrix ever wanted for her son. He smelled of expensive vanilla and entitlement, under the guise of helping Darian readjust. Oliver was suddenly at the house every day, pouring Darian scotch, laughing at his jokes, and looking at me like I was a cockroach that had scurried in from the rain. The stress began to take a severe physical toll on me. Omegas separated from their alphas often suffer bond sickness, but this was different. I was constantly nauseous. I couldn't keep anything down. My head spun with dizzy spells, and my scent, usually a sweet, calm honeysuckle, turned sour and frantic. One Tuesday afternoon, I collapsed at work. My boss insisted I go to the doctor, so I drove to a quiet private clinic in Berkeley, far away from the Caldwell family's network of elite physicians. Dr. Evans, an older gentle beta, ran a panel of tests. When he walked back into the examination room, he had a small, sympathetic smile on his face. "Well, Luca," Dr. Evans said, gently handing me a sonogram printout. "It's not just bond sickness. You're 8 weeks pregnant." The room started spinning again. Pregnant, I was carrying Darian's child, his heir, a tiny, fragile life created in love, now trapped in a nightmare. I stared at the little black and white blur on the paper. For a brief, naive moment, a spark of hope ignited in my chest. This will fix it, I thought. If I tell Darian he's going to be a father, his alpha instincts will kick in. It will break through the amnesia. He'll remember me. I rushed back to the Piedmont estate, clutching the ultrasound photo in my coat pocket like a lifeline. It was pouring rain again, the sky a bruised, angry purple. As I walked through the heavy oak front doors, the house was eerily quiet. I headed toward Darian's home office, the scent of his cedar pheromones growing stronger. The door was cracked open just an inch. I raised my hand to push it open, but the sound of Beatrix's sharp voice froze me in my tracks. "You need to handle the stray Darian," Beatrix was saying, the clinking of ice against crystal echoing in the room. "Oliver's family is ready to announce the merger, but they won't do it while that pathetic boy is still squatting in your guest room." I held my breath, waiting for Darian's reply, waiting for him to defend me, even just a little. "I know, Mother," Darian's cold, deep voice replied. It lacked any warmth. "I don't even know why I let him stay this long. The boy is delusional. He keeps looking at me like I owe him something. Have the lawyers draft a non-disclosure agreement and cut him a check. $1 million should be enough to make him disappear. I want him gone by Friday." "Good," Beatrix purred. "And what about that mark on his neck? And yours?" "I've already booked the laser removal for next week," Darian said dismissively. "It's just a scar, Mother. I'll burn it off and then I'll propose to Oliver." The ultrasound photo crumpled in my fist. He didn't care. The man I loved was truly gone, replaced by this ruthless empty shell. But a far darker realization suddenly washed over me, chilling my blood. Beatrix. If Beatrix found out I was pregnant with a Caldwell heir, she wouldn't just kick me out. She would lock me in a gilded cage until the baby was born, take my child to be raised by Oliver, and then throw me to the wolves. Alphas with money and power always won in family court. I would be nothing but an incubator, and my pup would be raised by a monster. I backed away from the door, my hand instinctively flying to my flat stomach. "No, I won't let them have you." The decision was made in a split second, fueled by an Omega's primal instinct to protect its young. I didn't cry. I didn't confront them. I walked silently upstairs to the guest room and pulled my old canvas duffel bag from the back of the closet. It was 2 a.m. when the house finally went completely dark. The storm outside was raging thunder, rattling the massive floor-to-ceiling windows. I packed only what I had brought into this relationship, my own clothes, my laptop, and my personal documents. I left behind the designer suits Darian had bought me. I left the Platinum American Express card on the kitchen island, and finally I slipped the heavy platinum mating ring off my finger. It felt like severing a limb. I placed it perfectly in the center of the kitchen counter, right next to the NDA Beatrix's lawyers had probably already started drafting. I walked out the back door, the freezing rain instantly soaking my hair. I climbed into my old beat-up Honda Civic, the car Darian had always begged me to sell, and turned the key. As I drove down the winding, slick roads of the Piedmont Hills, leaving the glowing mansion behind, I looked at the passenger seat. The crumpled ultrasound photo sat there. I rested my hand on my stomach, sending out a wave of calm, protective pheromones to my unborn child. "It's just you and me now, little one," I whispered into the dark, empty car. "And they will never, ever find us." I merged onto the desolate highway, driving straight into the dead of night, leaving my alpha, my heart, and my entire life in the rearview mirror. 4 years is a long time to hide, but when you are running from a ghost who wears the face of the man you love, you learn to blend into the shadows. I settled in Astoria, Oregon. It was a sleepy, damp coastal town where the fog rolled in thick off the Columbia River, providing the perfect cover for a runaway Omega and his secret. I built a quiet, safe life. I landed a job at Preston and Gallagher a modest architectural firm that specialized in restoring historic Victorian homes. The owners, Alaric Preston and his husband, David, were kind older betas who never asked too many questions about my missing mating mark or why my scent constantly spiked with residual anxiety. And then there was Leo, my beautiful, perfect, terrifyingly familiar son. At 3.5 years old, Leo was a miniature walking replica of Darian. He had the same unruly pitch-black hair, the same piercing, stormy grey eyes, and an intense, brooding demeanour that was highly unusual for a toddler. Even before he presented, the town doctor noted his bone density and aggressive growth curve. He was going to be an alpha. A powerful one. Every time I looked at him, my heart both swelled with overwhelming love and fractured with profound grief. He was the piece of Darian I got to keep, but he was also a daily reminder of the life that was violently stolen from us. Life was stable until a freezing Thursday morning in November. Alaric called me into his cluttered office, beaming with uncharacteristic excitement. "Luca, grab your best portfolio," he said, adjusting his glasses. "We just secured a pitch meeting for the largest commercial contract this town has seen in a decade. A massive tech conglomerate is buying up the old cannery district to build an eco-friendly corporate retreat. They specifically requested a presentation from our lead designer." "That's incredible, Alaric," I smiled, pulling my sketchbook closer. "Who's the client?" "Some San Francisco outfit," Alaric replied, waving a hand dismissively. "Caldwell Innovations." The sketchbook slipped from my fingers, hitting the hardwood floor with a sharp smack. The air was suddenly sucked from my lungs. A deafening ringing filled my ears. "No," I whispered, the color draining from my face. "Alaric, I can't do this pitch." "Luca, don't be ridiculous," Alaric frowned, misinterpreting my terror as stage fright. "You're our best guy. The CEO flew in personally this morning. He's waiting in the main conference room right now." Panic, pure and primal, surged through my veins. My Omega instincts screamed at me to run to grab Leo from daycare and drive until the ocean stopped me. But before I could formulate an excuse, the heavy oak door to Alaric's office swung open. "Mr. Preston," a deep, resonant voice rumbled. "My schedule is tight. Are we doing this or not?" I froze. My blood turned to absolute ice. Standing in the doorway, wearing a tailored charcoal overcoat that accentuated his broad, imposing shoulders, was Darian. He looked older. There were faint silver streaks at his temples, and the lines around his mouth were deeply etched with a harsh, permanent exhaustion. He stepped into the room, and the moment he did, the air pressure changed. His cedar and black pepper pheromones flooded the small office, heavy, suffocating, and incredibly dark. It wasn't the scent of a happy, thriving alpha. It was the scent of a wolf who had been starving for years. Darian's eyes swept over the room, landing on Alaric, and then they shifted to me. I stopped breathing. I waited for the look of disgust. I waited for the cold, empty stare he had given me in the hospital. Instead, Darian froze entirely. His pupils blew wide open, swallowing the grey of his irises until they were almost entirely black. A violent physical shudder wrecked his large frame. He took a stumbling step forward, his chest heaving as he drew in a ragged breath, inhaling the panicked honeysuckle scent I was frantically trying to suppress. "You!" Darian breathed his voice, barely more than a hoarse whisper. His hand reached up, clutching the fabric of his shirt right over his heart. He looked like a man who had just seen an apparition. Alaric looked between us, utterly confused. "Mr. Caldwell, this is Luca Harper, our lead." "Get out," Darian growled, not breaking eye contact with me. The Alpha command was so potent it rattled the glass in the window panes. Alaric stammered, terrified. Excuse me." I said, "Get out, Alaric." Darian roared, slamming his fist against the doorframe. Alaric didn't wait for a second invitation. He practically sprinted down the hallway, leaving us alone in the suffocating silence. Darian slowly closed the door behind him. He took another step toward me, like a predator stalking a wounded deer. I backed up until the edge of Alaric's desk pressed painfully into my lower back. "Who are you?" Darian demanded, his voice shaking with an emotion I couldn't decipher. Was it rage? Was it agony? Why do I know your scent? Why have I been dreaming about honeysuckle and rain for 4 goddamn years? My hands trembled violently as I gripped the edge of the desk. "You're mistaken, Mr. Caldwell. We haven't met. I need to leave." I tried to dart past him, but his reflexes were too fast. He caught my wrist. His grip was firm but surprisingly gentle, sending a jolt of electricity straight to the scarred, faded claiming mark on my neck. I gasped tears instantly, springing to my eyes as my body instinctively reacted to its Alpha's touch. Darian stared at my wrist, his thumb brushing over my frantically beating pulse. He looked up at my face, his expression twisted in pure agony. "I didn't marry him." He confessed the words tumbling out of him like blood from a wound. "Oliver, I stood at the altar 2 years ago, and I couldn't do it. My wolf felt dead inside. My mother told me I was crazy, but I kept having these flashes. A laugh, a hand in my hair, a ring." He reached into his breast pocket and pulled out a heavy platinum band. My mating ring. The one I had left on the kitchen island. "I found this hidden in my mother's safe 6 months ago," Darian said, his voice cracking. "And I found a bank ledger. A $1 million transfer she tried to make to an unknown account rejected because the account was closed. I hired investigators. It took them months to track the name attached to the rejected payment. Luca Harper." He took another step closer, his towering frame caging me against the desk. "I bought this entire cannery district just to get this meeting, just to see the face of the man my mother spent millions trying to erase. Tell me what she did. Tell me who you are to me." Before I could open my mouth to speak, my cell phone sitting on the desk beside us erupted with a loud, cheerful ringtone. The caller ID flashed brightly on the screen. Little Steps Daycare. Darian's eyes darted to the screen. I lunged for the phone, but he was closer. He snatched it off the desk, his brow furrowing. He answered it and put it on speaker before I could stop him. "Hi, Luca." A cheerful beta voice chimed through the speaker. "Sorry to bother you at work, but Leo is running a slight fever. He's asking for you. Can you come pick him up?" The silence in the room became lethal. "Leo!" Darian repeated his voice, dropping an octave. He looked at me, his eyes dropping to my stomach, then back to my terrified face. The math was doing itself in his brilliant, analytical mind. 4 years, a hidden ring, a desperate flight. "I'll be right there." I choked out to the phone, leaning over and ending the call. I grabbed my coat and bolted. This time he didn't stop me. He was too paralyzed by the shock. I didn't bother going back to my apartment. I drove straight to the daycare, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I carried a flushed, sleepy Leo out to the car, strapping him into his car seat with shaking hands. We had to leave. Today. Now. But as I turned around to open the driver's side door, a sleek black SUV aggressively blocked my Honda in the parking lot. Darian stepped out into the freezing Oregon rain. He didn't have an umbrella. He just stood there, the rain soaking his expensive suit, his chest rising and falling heavily. He walked slowly toward my car, his eyes locked on the back seat window. Leo, despite his fever, perked up. He pressed his little hands against the glass, staring at the massive man outside. Darian stopped a foot away from the window. I watched as his breath hitched. He was staring at a mirror image of himself. The dark hair, the grey eyes, the stubborn jawline, the undeniable scent of a Caldwell Alpha pup mixed perfectly with my sweet honeysuckle. Darian slowly fell to his knees in the wet asphalt, right there in the daycare parking lot. He pressed his forehead against the cold, rain-streaked glass of the car window, right where Leo's small hands were pressing from the inside. A guttural, agonizing sob tore from Darian's throat, the sound of an alpha realizing the magnitude of what had been stolen from him. The sound of a man mourning 4 years of missed first steps, first words, and morning cuddles. I stood in the rain, crying silently. Darian finally looked up at me from his knees. The ruthless billionaire was gone. The cold stranger from the hospital was gone. Here was a broken man begging for his life. Luca. He sobbed, the rain mixing with the tears streaming down his face. Please, please God, tell me he's mine. He's yours, Darian, I whispered, wrapping my arms around myself to ward off the chill. His name is Leo. Darian buried his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking violently. I slowly walked over to him, the bond inside me dormant and aching for 4 years, suddenly flaring to life, desperate to comfort its mate. I knelt in the puddles beside him and tentatively placed a hand on his soaked shoulder. He flinched, then practically threw himself at me. He wrapped his massive arms around my waist, burying his face into my stomach, right where Leo had grown. I'm so sorry. He wept, his voice muffled by my wet coat. I'm so sorry I didn't remember. I'm so sorry I let her do this to us. I pushed her out, Luca. I stripped her of her shares. I threw her out of the estate. She has nothing, but it doesn't matter because I had nothing. I was a ghost. He pulled back, framing my face with his large, shaking hands. His thumbs wiped away my tears. I don't have the memories, he confessed, staring deep into my eyes. The doctors say I might never get those 3 years back. But my soul never forgot you. My wolf never stopped howling for you. Please, let me fix this. Let me take care of you and our son. I will spend the rest of my life earning you back. I looked at this man, the alpha who had accidentally shattered my heart, and the mother who had deliberately crushed it. He was a victim just as much as I was. I reached up my fingers, tangling in his wet hair, pulling him closer. As our lips met, a violent spark ignited between us. The faded, scarred mating mark on my neck burned with sudden, fierce heat, rewriting the bond, sealing it shut once again. His cedar scent wrapped around me like a heavy protective blanket, chasing away the Oregon chill. You have a lot of bedtime stories to make up for. I breathed against his lips. Darian smiled, a real radiant smile that reached his stormy eyes for the first time in 4 years. He stood up, pulling me with him, and opened the car door to finally meet his son. The road to healing was going to be long, and the scars Beatrix left behind were deep. But as Darian lifted Leo into his arms, burying his face in his pup's neck, while wrapping his other arm tightly around my waist, I knew we were finally going home. Thank you so much for reading this dramatic Omegaverse story. If Luca and Darian's emotional journey pulled at your heartstrings, please hit that like button to show your support. Don't forget to share this video with your fellow romance and drama lovers, and subscribe to the channel for more intense, twist-filled original stories every single week. Drop a comment below telling us what you think Beatrix's ultimate karma should be. See you in the next one.